Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item on this evening's agenda is our first presentation, and it concerns the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, CAMA, and their long service recognition award to our city manager, Mr. Peter Steblin.
I used to always think I was the young guy, but when you get these long service awards, you get a double take.
Okay, well, no, that's not quite it. I was asked to say some nice words about Peter. Couldn't think of any, so they wrote them down for me here. And I'd like to take a brief moment on behalf of City Council to recognize one of Coquitlam's employees who have served this region in a management capacity for 17 years. The Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators has implemented a long service recognition awards program to recognize and celebrate CAMA members' dedication to public service and municipal management. Mr. Peter Steblin has been awarded a long service recognition award for his many years of administrative work both in Coquitlam and in other municipalities. Peter's a professional engineer with almost 40 years of experience in municipal government. He has helped lead our city in recent years as we continue with the many demanding ventures and challenges that go hand in hand with a growing community like Coquitlam. I, for one, this is actually not in the speech, I, for one, am most pleased to be able to work with Peter. I know Council shares that happiness that you're working with us here in Coquitlam. You've done great work for our community, and we expect many more years and many more long hours of work for the City of Coquitlam, all in return for which we will say some nice things about you every couple of years.
What a deal.
Congratulations, Mr. Steblin, on your long service recognition. I will quickly, we understand that there may be some people here tonight related to the Polygon's development, Polygon's proposal for an amendment to their development agreement at Windsor Gate. That's not on tonight's agenda. It was reported as such, but it isn't on tonight's agenda. We are approving the minutes of a meeting that related to it, but it's not on the agenda. So,
when is it going to be on the agenda? Can we tell the public when it's going to be on the agenda?
Nobody knows.
Yes, we can. It's not on the agenda yet. Council, as you remember, Council directed staff.
Is it going to be next week, week after, 2 weeks from now?
Okay. Council directed staff to ask the applicant. I'll go to Mr. McIntyre, please.
Sure.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Worship. In following Council's direction, we've gone back, we've had discussions with Polygon staff. My understanding is that they've agreed that further public information and consultation would be helpful, and they're going to be undertaking that. What we are working towards now is for them to go through that process and to get information back, which we would then return that to Council, and our target now is to do that by the end of July, before the summer break. So that's the time frame we're working within.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our second item is our second presentation. I'd like to invite Heather Stacey to come forward. She is with Share Family and Community Services and is here to speak on our Tri-Cities Food Drive Challenge.
Just Heather. Just Heather. Oh, okay, you can come back, Philip.
On behalf of Share Food Bank to ask for your support in the 4th annual Tri-Cities Food Drive Challenge. Councillor Robinson is spearheading Coquitlam again this a year, and we are grateful for her leadership and the city's participation in this event. Over the past 3 years, the city of Coquitlam has raised almost 12,000 pounds of food to fill the shelves at our food bank. When we look around the Tri-Cities, we see lots of new construction. However, it can be hard to see the poverty in our community. A great example of this hidden poverty is Adam and his mom. Adam and his mom are struggling. Adam's mom lost her job last fall, and she's unable to pay her bills. Adam's mom had to make a very hard choice to pay her rent or to purchase food. Adam feels hungry once or twice a day, and he's not feeling very good. And it's hard for Adam because he doesn't have the energy to play with his friends or to concentrate on his homework. The lack of nutritious food is affecting his grades in school. So Adam and his mom turned to the Coquitlam Food Bank, where they met Sandy, for whom I'm sure many of us here know. And every 2 weeks they received a food hamper, as well as apples, carrots, and some bread. Sometimes Allie, a volunteer, would give out cookies to the kids standing in the long line waiting for a food hamper. Adam loved this, especially if Allie had chocolate chip, his favorite cookie. With the assistance from the food bank, Adam's mom can make sure that Adam isn't hungry anymore. Adam now has the energy to concentrate on his schoolwork and to play again with all his friends. And a few weeks ago, Adam's mom found a job, and she no longer needs our food bank. Almost 1,700 families in Coquitlam needed help last year, and they came to the Coquitlam Food Bank for food relief. The Tri-Cities Food Drive Challenge is taking first from June 1st to 20th, and your participation is more than raising food. It helps to raise awareness and remind the residents of Coquitlam that their neighbors need help. With a week and a half left in this event, it's wonderful to see how the city of Coquitlam has rallied around this food drive. City departments have done a great job raising food, and it's wonderful to see the city encouraging its citizens to collect food donations in support of this event. I would encourage you to use your social media websites to generate interest. Then on June 21st, please join myself and Councillor Robinson at the Sheriff Food Bank in Port Moody when we weigh in all the food collected from each city, and we will announce the total weight collected from the event. Again, I would like to thank you for all your support. This food drive helps to ensure that those who are vulnerable in Coquitlam receive help. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stacey. I want to thank everybody in Coquitlam and all of our staff that have participated in past years, and I look forward to a great challenge as we bring in the food. Did you have a couple of words to add, Councillor Robinson?
Thank you. I want to thank Philip for coming out, and Heather, and just to remind everybody that we have, and most of council I think is going to be helping out with the ice cream fundraiser. We have one June 13th and one June 21st, and the RCMP are actually going to be doing a barbecue on the 21st, I think, or the 13th, one of those, but I'll confirm with you. So people, our staff can certainly go and have a barbecue, and those proceeds are going to be going to the food bank as well, because we are going to beat Port Moody and Port Coquitlam. This is Coquitlam's year to bring in the most money and food, and thank you for coming out, and let's hope that one day we don't need the food bank.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Reminding everybody that money actually goes a lot further than food. They're able to parlay money, but nonetheless, I couldn't let the occasion go by without throwing a couple of cans in. And come and get this, would you? I want to throw that in the top. Yeah, there we go. Okay, there we go. One. Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Give him the can opener.
The can.
Item 3 is our...
That's a little over the top. Sorry.
Item 3 is our third presentation. I'd like to invite Ms. Catherine Knaus to come forward. She's the Associate Vice President with Ipsos Reid Public Affairs, and she's here to speak on the 2012 Ipsos Reid Citizen Survey results for the City of Coquitlam.
Your Worship and Council, good evening.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Catherine.
I'd like to introduce Catherine Knaus. She's Vice President with Ipsos Reid, and she managed our 2012 survey. As you know, this year we're updating our corporate strategic plan, and Parks, Recreation and Culture is also in the process of developing their strategic plan. So this year we did a slightly larger survey than we normally do, surveying over 600 of our residents, and with some additional questions on it. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to go through the highlights of the survey. Thanks very much.
Ms. Knaus.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me here today to present the results of your 2012 Citizen Survey. This survey touches on a wide range of issues facing the community and provides a comprehensive assessment of citizen satisfaction levels, their attitudes, needs, and priorities. And ultimately, it's our hope that the results of the survey help guide the city make some important decisions around planning, budgeting, and issues management. Today's presentation is a summary of some of the key findings coming out of the research. I've also provided a detailed report that includes a much more comprehensive analysis to staff, and that is available. To do this year's research, we did a telephone survey with a random and representative sample of 602 Coquitlam residents who are aged 18 years or older. There are a number of steps we took to ensure that the sample was representative of the community. First, we pulled postal codes that are unique to Coquitlam, so that we knew that we were only talking with Coquitlam residents. And then we further confirmed residency by asking an upfront screening question before getting into any of the more detailed questions, and only those confirming that they were City of Coquitlam residents were able to proceed with the survey. We also set quotas by age, gender, and neighborhood to ensure that we conducted a minimum number of surveys with key target groups, and again, that's to make sure that the survey is representative and inclusive of the city as a whole. This year's survey was done in April 12th to 23rd. We weighted the data by age, gender, and neighborhood according to the most recent census data, and again, we want to make sure that it's representative of the population. A sample size of 602 has overall results that are accurate to within plus or minus 4.0 percentage points, 19 times out of 20. That's your overall margin of error. If you're doing any demographic analysis, which I'm not going to so much touch on in this presentation, but it's found in the detailed report, the margin of error will be larger for some of those sample subgroups that we're looking at. And then lastly, tracking and normative comparisons have been included where appropriate. As you may know, the city's been conducting this survey for many years, and being able to look at this year's results and how they compare to those in the past is a really valuable tool to identify some of the trends and priorities that are coming up and assess the progress the city's made in addressing some of the key issues. The normative comparisons, I'll just briefly touch on these, but we do quite a bit of work with other communities across the province. So what we've done is compared the City of Coquitlam's results to our Lower Mainland norms. So you can see how you're comparing to other Lower Mainland municipalities and provide some kind of benchmark against which you can evaluate your results. Lastly, just a note on survey scales. Throughout the questionnaire, we did very often use a 4-point scale, for example, of very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not very satisfied, not at all satisfied, rather than just using a satisfied, not satisfied 2-point scale. Using a 4-point scale is much more powerful because it provides you the ability to discriminate between the degrees of satisfaction. So you not only know how satisfied they are overall by combining the very and the somewhat, but you also have a measure of the intensity of satisfaction as well. So it gives you a more in-depth understanding of how citizens think about a specific issue or service. Key finding number 1. Overall, the survey results are predominantly positive for the City of Coquitlam. And yes, there's some issues that citizens would like to see receive greater attention, and I'll touch on those as we go throughout the presentation. But overall, the survey results should be viewed in a favorable context, and I think that's important to keep in the back of your head as we go through the results. And there's a number of indicators that speak to this. First, quality of life is good. Virtually all citizens, 96%, rate the overall quality of life in Coquitlam as very good or good. Our norm with that is 97%, so you're right on track with what other Lower Mainland municipalities rate quality of life. Quality of life is also improving. So not only did we ask overall quality of life, but we asked how citizens think it's changed in the past 5 years. Here you get half, 52% saying it stayed the same, whereas 29% say it's improved and 17% says it's worsened, for a net score of plus 12 points, indicating there's some positive momentum to the direction quality of life is taken. If you look at our norm on the right-hand side, the norm is actually only +3. So other residents elsewhere tend to say the quality of life is staying the same, or there's a bit of positive momentum, but certainly we're seeing a much more optimistic community in the city of Coquitlam. The tracking results are included in the table along the bottom, and this year's results are down slightly from what was reported in 2011, but it is still one of the highest ever reported, and I still think it speaks to a great deal of positive momentum around quality of life in the community. Citizens are also satisfied with the overall level and quality of city services. 94% of citizens are satisfied. 37% say they're very satisfied. This is on par with our norm of 91%, so again, on track with other communities. And consistent over the last few years of tracking, cities always receive consistently high satisfaction ratings, and this year is no exception. Citizens believe they receive good value for their municipal tax dollars. 83% rate the value of taxes as very good or fairly good, and that's exactly what we see in other communities as well. And again, there's been no significant change in the perceived value of taxes over the past few years. And contact experiences are mostly satisfactory. Among those who have contacted or dealt with the city or one of its employees in the past 12 months, 3/4, 76% are satisfied with the service they received. And there's some intensity behind this opinion as well, with nearly half of those, 47%, saying they were very satisfied with the service they received. So I think that's some good news. What's interesting is if you look at the norm is actually 84%. So doing a little less well in Coquitlam than we're seeing in other communities, which is interesting as well. But this year's results are on par with what we saw last year. They did reach a peak of 85% in 2010, fell in 2011, and then that's been maintained this year as well. Key finding number 2, transportation issues continue to dominate the public issue agenda. As I mentioned in the start of this, there's some issues that citizens would like to see receive greater attention, and transportation is certainly one of them. This was the first question that we asked in the survey. It was asked before citizens were provided any information about the types of services or programs that the city offers, and we asked citizens, in their view, what's the most important issue facing their community? They weren't prompted in these responses, so they were free to say whatever they felt was on their mind and what was their most important issue. And what comes up by far the number one issue is transportation at 45%. So you can see that's by far the most important issue. The next most important one is taxation, municipal government spending at 14%, but not even in the same ballpark as transportation-related issues. The norm for this is 32%, and if you look at the normative numbers, transportation does tend to come up as the number one issue in other communities as well, but not to the extent that we're seeing in Coquitlam. So even though it's the number one issue at 32%, that's still much lower than the 45% that we're seeing in the community, which really just speaks to the high level of awareness around these types of transportation issues in Coquitlam. This year's results aren't significantly different from what was reported last year, but if you look at the tracking data, it has gradually been trending upward over the past few years. So in 2010 it was 35%, 40% in 2011, and 45% in 2012. So it'll be interesting to see if that trend continues or levels out or goes down in future years. We asked residents a follow-up question, what's the biggest transportation issue facing the city of Coquitlam today? And rapid transit comes up on top. And again, this was an open-ended question, so they could say whatever they felt was the most important issue. Rapid transit consists of mentions of the Evergreen Line, SkyTrain, and lack of poor rapid transit. So that's what's included in that rapid transit net. That was also the top issue in 2011, but I think what's interesting is that these types of mentions have actually gone down this year as compared to 2011, which might speak to some of the awareness or the progress that's been made in getting that Evergreen Line up and running, and people see some commitments that have been made, and so that might be a reason why we're seeing some of those mentions going down. Other transportation issues include lack of reliable transit and congestion round out the top three. We also asked citizens the importance of specific transportation solutions, and given the importance that citizens place on transportation, it might not be surprising that all of these are deemed important, but there's still some variation in the importance placed on them. Overall, the most important one is upgrading the condition of existing roads through repaving at 89% saying this is important, 40% say it's very important, and that's actually gone up from 2011. 2011 it was 84%, this year it's 89%. Other important ones would be promoting public transit services for both local and regional trips, improving public transit infrastructure, improving pedestrian facilities, increasing capacity of roads, and promoting trip reduction programs. The one at the bottom is expanding bicycle facilities. It's still important at 57%, but clearly in terms of a priority as compared to the other transportation solutions, there's other areas that citizens would like to see the city focus their attention. Key finding number 3, taxation. Municipal government spending is also on citizens' minds this year. And I did mention this earlier. It's a number 2 issue overall at 14%. But again, keep in mind that this is much behind those transportation-related mentions. So even though some citizens mention it, it's not to the extent that we're seeing for other issues. Looking at the norm, mentions of taxation municipal government spending are more prevalent in Coquitlam than we're seeing elsewhere, so that's perhaps something to keep an eye on, but this year's results aren't significantly different than what was reported last year. We asked citizens if they had to choose, because it's often have to make difficult decisions, would they like to see the city increase taxes or cut services, and what we're seeing is 43% saying increase taxes and 43% saying cut services. It really is split down the middle with this one, and citizens have a difficult time kind of saying what one they would like to see the direction see the city take. And it's maybe an issue that needs more dialogue with the citizens to let them know kind of what the implications of each approach are and some of the consequences that go along with each of those choices. If you look at the tracking data, I'll talk about this first, but this result is consistent with what we've seen in 2011 as well. So that split, equally split between increased taxes and cut services, is not unusual compared to what we saw last year. But if you go back further in the tracking data, previously, if you look at 2003, for example, there was that clear preference for increasing taxes over cutting services. And that continued up until 2008, right around when the recession hit. And at that point, citizens kind of rethought this process and said, that's when we saw that process of, okay, let's equally split between increased taxes and cut services. They perhaps feel that they have to tighten their own belts at home, and it's only fair that their municipal officials have to do it as well. So that's interesting that we saw that in 2008, and it's been continued ever since then as well. If you look at our norm for this is 53% increased taxes and 33% cut services. So there is more of a preference for tax increase in other communities. But I should point out that norm is based on several years of tracking throughout the community. It does go beyond 2008. So I think if you were to look at just in the past couple of years, there'd be a bit, that gap between those would be narrowed. But my personal experience tells me that even in the past few years when we've asked this question, there does tend to be that preference for increased taxes, even though the gap might not be so wide as what's indicated with this norm. Key finding number 4. While crime rounds out citizens' top 3 issues in 2012, crime-related mentions have been steadily declining over the past few years. So 10% of citizens this year mentioned crime as the most important issue facing their community. That is significantly less than we see in other lower mainland communities where the norm is 18%. And while it's not significantly different this year as compared to 2011, it has been trending down over the past few years, and it in fact reached a peak in 2006 at 34%, which is clearly quite a bit higher than the 10% that we're seeing this year. We asked a follow-up question and asked citizens their biggest crime and personal safety issue facing the city of Coquitlam today. And even though they might not have any, crime might not necessarily be kind of one of those leading top-of-mind issues, they still are able to voice some crime concerns. And break and enter property theft tops the list at 20%. Other ones are mentioned less often and include drugs, auto theft, vandalism. It's also worth noting that a relatively large number say none or don't know, 18% and 11% respectively, which again speaks to some of those concerns that crime, even though they're able to voice some concerns, might not be on the radar screen of a lot of residents. The top issues in 2011 was also break and enter property theft, so similar to what we're seeing this year. And key finding number 5, Coquitlam is a physically active community and the city is doing a good job meeting the recreation needs of most citizens. And I just have a few slides that speak to this. On average, citizens participate in moderate physical activity 4 times a week. The norm is 3.9 times, so right on average with what we're seeing. Parks and trails are the most well-used. Almost all residents have used these in the past 12 months. And there are no major barriers to participation. So we did ask about different barriers, and of the ones we tested, none of them came up as major barriers. They're all more likely to be not minor barriers or not barriers at all. Of the items that we tested, the two main barriers to participating are cost and lack of information. It is worth noting that we didn't ask about lack of time, but I can tell you from my experience conducting this type of research in other communities, that does tend to pop up as the #1 issue, but it's also one of those ones that's more difficult for the city to control and implement solutions that might help citizens around that. Citizens are satisfied with the opportunities for parks, recreation, and culture that are available in Coquitlam. So if you look at this chart, all of these different opportunities score very, very highly in terms of satisfaction, ranging from 95% for hiking, walking, and biking trails, 92% for parks, 91% for sports fields and outdoor courts. Indoor racket and court facilities is at the bottom at 74%, but clearly even at 3/4 of the citizens being satisfied with those, it's clearly meeting the needs of most citizens. So really this doesn't identify any areas in need of immediate improvement. We also asked about the importance of these different things, and even though there might not be any immediate areas, there's certainly some that are more important than others. Neighborhood parks comes out on top. Citizens are well using these, so it's no surprise that they're one of the most important ones at 90%. Hiking, walking, and biking trails, same thing at 87%. So all of these are important. The one that's not so important to citizens is indoor racket and court facilities at 41%. So that wraps up my presentation, and happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. I've got questions from Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I always find this report very valuable. It sort of gives us some outcome data that allows us to make some future decisions, so I appreciate it. I do have a question about data collection. Off the start, you mentioned that you started with postal codes in order to make sure that they were Coquitlam households. And given that more and more people are letting go of landlines and switching over to cell phones, I'm wondering how, as a researcher, you've been able to adapt to that, or is there a risk that we're missing out on a segment that we can't tie into because they're on cell phones?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Yes, this survey is landline only, so it does not include those with cell phones. The reason for that is we're not able to get cell phone sample that's specific to Coquitlam. It's just too small an area. If you're doing a national survey, that might be something that's available to you, but not in this particular case. But we took a number of steps to counter that. The most important one, I guess, is setting quotas by age, gender, and neighborhood. We know that people with cell phone-only houses do tend to be that younger demographic, so by ensuring that we're conducting a minimum number of interviews with those younger people, that kind of makes sure that their views are included in the survey, and then we weight the results on the back end as well. I guess my other point to speak to that is what's the alternative? Mm-hmm. We've tried in other communities doing a different approach where we mail a random sample a letter inviting them to take part in an online survey, but when we look at the results for that younger demographic is still not choosing to take part in that research. So with the telephone survey, at least you have that option of setting that quotas, and you can keep making those calls until you do have a good sample of those young people in there.
So, but as we move forward and more of this starts to happen, yeah, we're going to have to find other ways of, or you're going to have to find other ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly something on our radar screens as a company, and we're looking into it. But right now, we still feel this is a really solid way of getting you the views that you need.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. You know, this is a very good report. I like this just because it's a random survey. It deals with people's opinions, and it's really probably the best guidebook that we have for understanding the issues of the citizens of Coquitlam, where they're going, what they're feeling, and what's going on in our city. So I really appreciate the work that goes into this. I have a couple of questions. One's, you know, we talk about action analysis grid, garbage recycling services now. That was more pointed towards the multifamily end of it and where we can improve on that. And then we talk about road maintenance. Now we've made great, and I guess we've made a lot of improvements in road maintenance over the years. I guess we look at, on page 13, we talk about reasons quality of life is improved. We talk about improved transportation and roads. And then the analysis says, so I guess what people are saying is that, well, we've made a good gain here. There's still a ways to go in improving, I guess, maybe into their local areas more than the major roads. Is that what you were seeing into that?
Yeah, I think kind of transportation and roads is going to be always one of those where it's one of those ones that affect their day-to-day life. They're driving their cars and they see the potholes in the roads, or they know what the condition is like. So there's always going to be maybe some comments coming up with regards to that. But I think you do make some good points with the. I'm just trying to find it because it's a detailed report that you're referring to. But yeah, improved transportation roads was one of the top reasons why quality of life had improved. So certainly citizens have noticed some improvements that have been made in that, and that's always encouraging to see.
And I guess for Mr. Suzak in engineering, this is a good report because we've just had a report about seeking more funding for our road network, and this will pay to council's main ideas of maybe supporting that initiative in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to go to the slide, page 41, transportation priorities. Mm-hmm. And we list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, going from upgrading the condition of existing roads through repaving all the way down to expanding bicycle facilities, lanes, pathways, and bike parking. Are there any comparative norms with other parts of British Columbia or other parts of the Lower Mainland on these specific issues? Because these aren't questions that are open-ended. You give people these specific alternatives, choices. Are these fairly typical to other municipalities? Do we know?
This question in particular was unique to Coquitlam, so I don't have norms to it, but I agree that it's a question that could apply to any community. So in future years, who knows, we might have norms for it, but for now, we only have this year's results compared to previous years.
I'm interested in this because it's a point that I raised when we were considering approval of our strategic transportation plan earlier this year, which has provision of bicycle lanes, pathways, and those sorts of things is quite a high priority. Mm-hmm. And I pointed out at the time that last year's report actually had that as the lowest priority, and I see it's still the low priority. So what the city wants to do is a little out of sync with what the citizens actually want. And that's an issue that we have to deal with. And that was actually for that matter, for that main reason that I voted against the strategic transportation plan, because I thought that we were quite out of sync on that. So I was especially interested then to find out if there was anything from another city that we could pair this to. So it's just internal now.
Yeah, I wish there was something I could give you in regards to that, but unfortunately there's not.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple of comments. There was you made reference, and I don't fault you for the language, but you made reference to the thought that citizens feel less strongly or feel about racket sports, for example. And I'm almost cautioning you on the words, because I suspect there are some citizens who feel very strongly, but rather fewer citizens feel strongly about that than feel it about others, because we do hear that all the time about the challenge of the top of mind sports, and then there's a few that really want some racket facilities, and we're trying to meet their needs. On the crime side, I was intrigued by the thought that we have, well, let's ignore our crime rate, which actually is quite low, but our citizens perceive our crime to be perhaps half as many of our citizens feel crime as an issue here than in other communities. Where are the, can you give us some idea? I know you can't tell us which communities, but where geographically are the other communities?
They're all across the Lower Mainland. Yeah. So it doesn't include every Lower Mainland community, but it includes most of them.
Okay. There you go. Well, I was pleased with that anyway. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is very interesting. One of your slides showed that about satisfaction with contact experiences, and it indicated that 76% are satisfied, are very satisfied, or somewhat satisfied, compared to the average norm of 84%. So that's a difference of 8%, which in my mind is somewhat troubling. But I don't suppose that you did any follow-up on that, did you, to find out what the issues are?
No, in this particular survey, this was the only question that we asked on that. The follow-up would be, of course, among those who aren't satisfied, why aren't you satisfied, or what could the city do to improve its service? And we didn't ask those, but perhaps it's something that the city could look into further on their own through other avenues. I mean, my take is the 76% is, it's lower than what you're seeing elsewhere, so yes, ideally you want to be at least up to where the other communities are performing, but 76% is still 3/4 of your residents saying that they're satisfied with the service that they received. So I don't think it's entirely as gloomy a picture as just looking at it compared to the norm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. Okay, the one that you have there is the festivals. A lot of people are very dissatisfied with the festivals. Do you know why or any reason?
Could you maybe refer me to the chart that you're looking at?
I didn't get that in my package. I was noticed that the council members have theirs in there. I didn't get mine in my package.
So it was last week.
Okay. Anyways, towards the end that you were
so
talking
the
about festivals.
satisfaction with those, I'm just going to look at it right now. So public festivals and community events was 85% satisfied.
That's
so
right.
it's still quite a few of your citizens are satisfied with those. It does sit in the lower half of that item if you look at the chart as a whole, but that's simply because all of those items are deemed satisfactory by the majority of citizens. So we didn't do any follow-up research as to why they might not be satisfied with that, but I certainly don't take that as a negative finding.
Okay. Also, B&Es, breaking and entrance are all the crime stats are going down except the B&Es are not. Any reason for that? Any comments on that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
The break-in and enters.
Yes. Break and enters. Again, these were simply the top-of-mind crime and personal safety concerns that citizens mentioned. So, and they were, I guess the other thing is, they were those unprompted mentions, so they're free to say kind of what's top of mind. You might see a different answer if you asked it as a closed-ended question and ask how concerned are you about these things, and then measure different types of crimes. But it is one of those ones that's just kind of staying at a plateau.
Yeah, and also this year, you got a split in increasing taxes and cutting services. It's 43 and 43. Okay, now, when the question is asked, do you want the same level of service by cutting taxes? I think that that question is a wrong way to ask a taxpayer. There's nothing to say that you have to cut services to give them the same amount of or increase taxes to give them the same amount of services.
Yeah,
it's a wrong question.
I appreciate what you're saying. We purposely asked the question this way because we want citizens to kind of be in the same position that staff and council are in and having to make tough decisions every day. And if it came down to it, what side do they really fall on? And we do want to force them to make a decision. We purposely don't leave that midpoint in there that would be nothing, leave everything the same as it is, because the reality of the situation is perhaps one day that's not going to be the case, and the intent of this question is to provide you with some guidance around that.
Because if you have a good year in building permits and everything else, and you get extra money in a cash register, doesn't mean say you have to cut services or up the taxes some more to give them the same level of service. So.
Yeah, and we're not saying you have to cut services or increase taxes. We're just saying if you're faced with this situation, this is what citizens are saying, the direction they would like the city to take.
That's exactly the objections that I have. The fact is that the way you ask them the question, those questions are loaded questions, and they're not a fair question to ask the client, the taxpayer. So that's all I'm saying. It doesn't make a great deal of difference, but maybe it could be answered a little different, or the question could be asked a little different and get a little different answer.
Well, I agree that if you ask the question differently, you would get it different.
43% are dissatisfied with taxes, and the 43% are satisfied with taxes. So, it's quite a big change than what we had for the last few years. Looks like there's more and more people getting dissatisfied. Okay? Thank you.
Just a point of clarification here.
Sorry, I was next. I'll be right with you. There was I thank Councillor Sikora for going on that line because it reminded me of a line of questions that I had. It came up several weeks ago with a resident that phoned and said, what happened here? I got asked these questions. I proved I was in Coquitlam, and then they asked how old I was, and I said how old I was, and they hung up. They politely hung up, but they said and I already know the answer, but I do want to have you explain how that happens.
Yeah, and hopefully we do handle it very sensitively, but the reason that happens is because we do set those quotas for age, gender, and neighborhood, and we know from experience that certain groups are easier to reach and more willing to take part in surveys than others. So if we didn't have those quotas in place, your survey would skew towards female and it would skew towards older. So by implementing those quotas, the survey at the start is open to everyone. Once we've reached our quota with a specific group, we then politely thank them for their time and their interest and appreciate them taking the opportunity to take part in the survey. But unfortunately, we've reached their quota. And unfortunately, that does happen sometimes, and I know people are interested in offering their opinions. So if that does happen, I would encourage them to reach out to you, as this person did, and say that they're still interested in participating, or at least voice their opinions through another way.
And the reason I brought that up is, well, partly for clarification, but also partly, if you look at page 51, you'll see a discussion about festivals. For example, Councillor Sikora mentioned that the question actually isn't satisfaction with festivals, it's the importance of the following investments. The strategic priorities for Parks and Rec, and in this case, festivals are ranked as a strategic priority for 3/4 of the population, whereas neighborhood parks and playgrounds are 90% of the population. But it skews differently. I'll be different responses depending on the age of the person. Playgrounds are more important for some categories, but the 18 to 25 don't view playgrounds as vitally important in their lives.
And we've included quite a bit of demographic analysis in the report. So just going back to parks, festivals, and community events, those are more important to those who are between 18 and 34 years of age. Among that demographic, it's 78% important compared to a low of 67% important among those who are 55 years or older. So there's a lot of demographic analysis included in the detailed report, because we do recognize that there are some obviously big differences in needs and priorities among the different groups of the population.
And I don't recall if you gave this information, but on the festivals question, for example, are we different than from other communities? 3/4 of our population views it as a priority. Is it 85% in other communities, or 65, or?
Yeah, again, those are ones we don't have norms for. They're actually new to the city's questionnaire this year.
There you go. Okay, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, it was the point of clarification, something that Councillor Sikora sort of touched on, and it's something I meant to ask in my first round of questioning. And this deals with the increased taxes versus cut services figures. And you pointed out in your presentation that after the recession of 2008, it really changed quite a bit from pretty high number of increased taxes and low cut services to basically equal. And although those figures have been fluctuating a bit, but here's why I want the clarification. It's my understanding that with a plus or minus 4% 19 times out of 20, you can't really say that these things are really anything other than they're virtually identical for the last 4 years.
Yes, over the last 4 years, they've stayed the same. You've seen that equal split between the two.
So given the plus or minus 4%, they've really been quite stable.
Yes, but before there, that was their clear preference.
Before then, so that big change, so it's been relatively the same. And on that specific question, I think it's, I remember when I first saw the report last year, and this question was asked, I hadn't seen the detailed question. And I think the detailed question is actually, and I'll have a question at the end of this, very specific, actually, about what it means. It says, municipal property taxes are the primary way to pay for services provided by the City of Coquitlam. Due to the increased cost of maintaining current service levels and infrastructure, the City of Coquitlam must balance taxation and service delivery levels. To deal with the situation, which one of the following 4 options would you most like the City of Coquitlam to pursue? And then you list increased taxes, the same level as 2 types of increase, 2 types of... That's pretty specific, I think. Is this the same question that has been asked every year, exactly the same question, or has this been altered?
No, it's the exact same question asked every year, and it's the exact same question that's asked in all those normative measures. It's the same one in all those communities.
And is this generally seen in the industry as quite a balanced sort of a question, or is it torqued in any sort of a way because cities want to get a certain answer?
No, it's generally viewed as a balanced question. It is one of the ones that we get more comments and feedback on, because certainly it does provide more opportunities for discussion.
Yeah, I see it as pretty balanced as well, so thank you.
I see no other questions. We'll have other questions tomorrow. You can come back, I assume. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item is item 4. It's the minutes of the public information meeting held Tuesday, May 15th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's unfortunate that we have to wait till end of July to vote on Polygon with their high rises because I'll tell you something, I'm getting an awful lot of emails, a lot of calls, and
Councillor Sikora, this is the firearm one.
pardon? Yeah, oh, sorry, yes, sorry.
Okay. Any other issue? No? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the minutes of the reconsideration hearing held Monday, May 28th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Yeah, this
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer, and this is the one, Councillor Sikora.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm sure that everybody else is getting emails and phone calls and letters and everything else regarding.
No, sorry.
It's not
my
this one
apologies.
either?
No, this is, no.
Consideration public hearing, go ahead, Grover. No, this
We'll
is
go one
for
more.
Grover.
Okay.
Sorry.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. This is the one.
Item 6 is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, May 28th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Now.
Item 7 is the minutes of the public meeting pertaining to 3096 Windsor Gate held Monday, May 28th. The recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we have to wait till end of July to get this over with, because I'll tell you, with all the emails I'm getting and all the letters I'm getting, the phone calls I'm getting, it's pretty heavy. It's really hot and heavy, and I guess before end of July comes along, things are getting a lot hotter and a lot heavier. I'm willing to vote on it today. I think that we've had almost enough information on it, and frankly, to drag this out any longer, I'm not prepared to do it. So I'm really concerned that with what we've done is stalled with Polygon going to the neighborhood to discuss it. I don't think any discussion is going to change these people's minds. They got very, very legitimate complaints and legitimate problems that they don't want to see this developed. And frankly, I'll tell you what, some of the letters are pretty strong when they call bribery, corruption, and they call many, many other things. I'm sure every council member got that letter. And to me, I guess in a sense, they're probably correct. The fact is that we're selling our soul to get the next $1.5 million. That's what we're doing. And I think it's wrong. I think it's totally, totally wrong to attach a dollar sign on something that the developer really didn't even want to build the high-rise. The developer did not want to build a high-rise. He wanted to build what was on the community plan map and what went through the public hearing. So, but
it's the developer's application.
We got talked into it. They got talked into it to go for this high-rise and a few other things to get the next $1.5 million, and I think it's wrong. So I'm not going to speak any further, because I could speak for about 5-10 minutes more, but I'm not going to. But it's not sitting good on my stomach. Matter of fact, I seem to get a little sick to my stomach when I hear these kind of comments. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
I have some antacids for Councillor Sikora. Hopefully you can feel better. But this isn't the time for debate. I think this is just about us adopting some minutes, and what we were told at the end is that the developer was going away to go back and talk to the residents. They heard what they had to say to see what they can accommodate, and they'll bring it back. So at this point, we have no role. We heard from the public. We're continuing to hear from the public, and we'll wait and see sort of what happens. So if you want some antacids, I have some in my bag. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I was very pleased to learn that Polygon is embracing the opportunity to re-engage with the public, holding a series of meetings. I understand they are also going to be bringing translators with them, because we learned at the public meeting rather, and that and subsequent letters that we got. There's a lot of people who are new Canadians from different parts of Asia, and they're going to be accommodating those people as well. Translators on site and translating some of the information to better explain. And I happened to bump into to somebody from Polygon at a conference I was at last week, and he was very committed to listening, and if there are good suggestions coming forward, to perhaps even altering his plans in some way, but he's open to everything. And I think to listen to what Councillor Secor is suggesting, to nip it in the bud right now, to not give that an opportunity to make this plan even better, if that's what Polygon has in mind, would be a disservice to the citizens of Coquitlam, and specifically to the citizens of Windsor Gate. As you recall, most of those citizens were, their first point of being upset with this was not hearing about it, not knowing about the first meetings, learning at the last minute about it. That put them off on the wrong foot, granted. And so Polygon is going back as a good corporate citizen and saying, listen, we'll do this again. Let's try to make it better. We're going to listen to you, and I want that process to unfold. I think it's an important issue, without a doubt. Councillor Secor has recognized that it's an important issue. He's right there. But because it's important, that doesn't mean we should decide on it right away, prematurely. I think we should take our time and make sure that we get it right.
And I'll echo those comments. We actually asked the Council's request that the developer go back and have some discussions. Imagine if a week later we said we didn't mean it. We meant we were going to make our decision up without that discussion. I think the discussion needs to take place. I've spoken to a couple of owners now who have more information and actually have changed their mind and are in favor of. They think it'll be a better development, but I don't know that everyone will come around that way. I just know that I think more information for those residents is better, and then we can make a decision. This wasn't a public hearing. We weren't required to have a public hearing. We had a public meeting, though, and held the public hearing rules, and I think that's the right thing to do, and now I think the right thing to do is to let the process proceed. In the end, any suggestion that the developer didn't want to make the application the developer made, I don't know where that comes from, but having spoken with the developer, I know that's not the case, but we'll watch the process go forward. So the motion is to receive the minutes.
It's been moved and seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. That's why I said the motion is to receive the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item 8 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, May 28th, and the recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is an item of business arising out of the council and committee meeting held Monday, May 28th, and this pertains to a taxi application to the Passenger Transportation Board. The committee recommends that council request that the PTB prohibit the reallocation of any accessible taxis, that they limit the 15% of reallocated services to only that company that currently has a license to serve the airport, that being Coquitlam Taxi, and that the 15% reallocation be based upon the full taxi fleet of the Coquitlam-based taxi companies up to a maximum of 14 vehicles.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson and Reamer at the same time, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. You work it out later.
Clerk will go out alphabetically.
Okay. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have an amendment to propose. Item 2 of this motion, I believe, is intended to capture the idea that only those cars that are presently going to the airport would be included in the cars that could go downtown. We don't want to reduce the fleet here any further than it is already potentially depleted. The presentations, all the material that we got around taxis bears it's almost worse than the Income Tax Act in trying to comprehend. We have 3 taxi companies in the city, 3 taxi companies that we were hearing from. it would appear that they're all sort of under common management, common entity. We were told at one point that we'll move the cars. You know, the cars go from one company to another. And so to limit it to only that company that has a license to serve the airport, that's Coquitlam Taxi. But it doesn't say only those cars that presently serve the airport. And my proposed amendment would be, say, limit the 15% of reallocated service to only those cars licensed to serve the airport. And 3.
It's been moved. Seconded by Councillor Robinson. Does Mr. Suzak have any comment related to that?
Well, thanks, Your Worship. I'll do my best, given I was not at that meeting, but I'm reading the recommendation 2 and the recommendation 3. It is my understanding that the 3 companies that are situated in Coquitlam are under common ownership, but only one of those companies has licenses for their taxis to go to the airport. And the way I read these recommendations is that recommendation number 3 recognizes that there is a request to have more cars sent to the airport. So the company, as I understand it, that has a license, if you will, to go to the airport could reassign within that company, up to 14 vehicles. There's obviously an aggregate taken of so many vehicles that are situated in Coquitlam, 3 companies. Those, I'm not sure which taxi company it is, but it's only the one taxi company that's currently authorized to go to the airport would have an ability to have more of their cars go to the airport.
No.
That's my understanding.
No.
Okay, sorry.
No, the item 1, prohibit the reallocation of any accessible taxis. It's all about the reallocation, and the reallocation is to downtown during peak periods and red letter days and those sorts of things. So it was the council had requested that that staff write to the Passenger Transportation Board saying we don't want any taxis that currently serve Coquitlam on a Saturday night to be downtown on a Saturday night. We want it limited to those that could be at the airport on a Saturday night. And so it was taxi specific. It was car specific, and that was the reason for the amendment, I believe.
Yes, and as you returned me to paragraph 1, that reminds me that what pushed me one of the things that pushed me in this direction was, I think we were told at one point during our discussions that Coquitlam Taxi, in fact, doesn't have any accessible taxis. The accessible taxis are in the other 2 companies, but at the same time, we were told that the accessible taxis are popular choices to go to the airport because they hold more. But they can't go to the airport because they're not in Coquitlam Taxi, yet they do seem to be able to go to the airport. And so I suspect that it is relatively easy to move cars between companies and hang whatever particular license you wish on them as you would. So my amendment is intended to make it clear that we won't lose any cars. Cars that could have been at the airport could be downtown, but no extra cars leaving the Tri-Cities.
I took it differently. I suspect I heard that they're popular to go to the airport. You don't need to be licensed to serve the airport in order to drop a passenger off at the airport.
Exactly.
And so if you call for a cab to go to the airport, you can request a particular vehicle. When you get to the airport to come back, you can't request a particular vehicle, and if you're in a Prius, if you're driving a Prius, you're going to get a fare. You might have to wait a minute until someone that's a single comes up, but you're going to get a fare. So I don't know that that's the case. I think it's the case that on the way to the airport, they get requests for the van.
Your Worship, I think we're all making the point that the whole thing is quite confusing, and my attempt is to make sure that we get the result that we're after.
And since it only relates to the letter that staff will write, I suspect they will be able to work this all out. Councillor O'Neill.
I just want to go over it and not use percentages as much as some hard figures here, okay? The companies asked us for the right to have 15% of their 91 vehicles served downtown on these special nights. That equals 14 vehicles. The way the motion reads now is that those 14 vehicles have to come from the company that has the license to serve the airport, that being Coquitlam Taxi. Coquitlam Taxi currently has 30 of their 31 taxis licensed to serve the airport. So what we are, actually, with the way number 2 is written, it actually has a little bit of leeway in it that Councillor Nicholson will eliminate with his amendment. Because the way number 2 is written right now, those 14 vehicles that could go downtown could come from the fleet of 31. The way Councillor Nicholson wants it now is that those 14 vehicles have to come from the 30 of the 31 taxis that are licensed to serve the airport. And I think that's good. That makes it extremely precise. And I hope Mr. Suzak understands that, because it can get pretty confusing. But so that's what we want. We want those taxis that are licensed to serve the airport, those being the only ones that can be drawn upon to fill that roster of 14 vehicles that on those special days can serve downtown as well.
Okay. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, in other words, there could be 30 odd vehicles go to the airport or to downtown Vancouver if he's licensed 31 vehicles to go to the airport.
The percentage in the motion and the percentage that they've requested of PTV is 15.
And I think, before we vote on anything like this, I think we ought to do it again, because at first we didn't do it and we got ourselves in a little bit of a problem as far as the taxi companies are concerned. I think we should bring the owner of Coquitlam Taxi to the council chambers, or send him at least this one to see if he agrees with it, because it's totally changed from what he understood what it was to begin with. And I think we have to bring him in again and let him look at it. I mean, he's got 91 taxis. Doesn't matter what company you belong to. So if only 14 are allowed to go to the airport, and they're also allowed to go to downtown Vancouver, which way they're going to go? What are they going to serve, the airport, or they're going to serve downtown Vancouver? So there's 77 other taxis on the road. They're looking after Coquitlam. I think it's a hell of a lot of taxis to be looking after Coquitlam, and not being able to leave to go downtown and otherwise. So I'm really confused with this, and I'm concerned. He's got 91 taxis. He's got 91 vehicles. So it doesn't matter who. It's the same owner for 3 different companies that serve Coquitlam. So there's 77 of those taxis are staying in Coquitlam.
This is what he wanted.
That's what he asked for.
That's what he asked for.
That was the request.
Well, I don't think it was his request. I don't think it was exactly like, I don't think so. I think I'd like to clear it up with him first, maybe bring him to the council chambers and ask him, because I really think that it's been revised and changed to somewhat. Okay?
Yeah, Councillor Asmundson on a point of information, please. Councillor.
Late last week from the owner of the Bel Air and the companies, and he was fine with this. This suits his needs. I think what Councillor Nicholson's is just a little tightening up, cleanup. It's nothing major. And he was pleased with this. This satisfies his need and what he's going to have. So I think this is good. I think Councillor, it's just a minor tweak into the wording and stuff. So I think it's fine. I have no problem with the amendment there. And I think he's happy with this. We had a little call. He said, thank you very much. This is what we're needing. So,
Councillor Nicholson on the amendment.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the point that, in fact, it's not 77 cars that will be in Coquitlam. There are 30 licensed to go to the airport. Any 14 of those 30 could also go downtown. But potentially, the number of taxis available to serve Coquitlam is 61. 91 less the 30 that may be running back and forth to the airport. And I think Councillor Asmundson's right. I think we're doing here what they asked us to do, with the exception of asking not to reallocate accessibles. But
okay,
thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. On the motion as amended, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10 is the minutes of the Maillardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, May 3rd. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting pertains to priority setting of the 5-year work plan. The committee's recommendation is that Council direct staff to install new street signs which incorporate the heritage character of Maillardville, and that Council direct staff to investigate the option of installing bilingual traffic control signs in Maillardville incorporating Canada's 2 official languages.
My own comments on this, if we entertain this, I'd like us to take the wording from number 2, direct staff to investigate, and apply it to both of them. We don't have any idea of the cost of the signage or anything like that, so we could ask staff to, if council wishes to, ask staff to investigate those.
That's fair enough.
I'll need your microphone on because you'll need to word it. Can you turn your microphone on then, please? There we go.
I'll move that on number 1, move to investigate on that one.
I'll second.
Okay, so we're moving both 1 and 2, but 1, it's an investigation. Reporting back. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. And that was moved by Asmussen, second by Reamer.
Item 11 is the minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 16th. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 12 is the minutes of the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, May 24th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Recommendation arising out of that committee is their 2012 committee work plan, and the recommendations that Council approve the 2012 Arts and Culture Advisory Committee work plan as follows, and you see a series of bullets before you.
Second. Moved by Councillor Nicholson, second by Councillor O'Neill. My questions are, this is the Art and Culture Advisory Committee, an LPGA, which I believe is it's got some art and culture associated with it, and similarly the summer games. Now, I wonder to what extent and how that works out, if staff had any comment. Mr. Dumont.
Thank you very much. I can comment on the Canadian Women's Open, the LPGA event that's going to be going on between August 20th and 26th. That's what they consider a turnkey event. So Golf Canada basically organizes and puts on that event. The city does have a role in that, but it's largely related to traffic and parking and helping facilitate them getting spectators to and from the golfing events over the course of that week. And so it's primarily an engineering role. I'm not sure there's really an arts and culture role with that particular event. So that would be my comment on that one. I'll defer to Laurie on the 125th celebration.
Ms. McKay.
Thank you. My understanding of the discussions with the Arts and Culture Committee was their interest in looking for opportunities to display and present arts and culture for visiting people to the city. So exploring whether there couldn't be sort of a cultural games component as part of the summer games, whether that's through exhibits or vending as part of the event. So it's exploratory in nature, along the themes of sort of what we saw in 2010 around the Olympics and having a cultural Olympiad that enhanced that event for the visitor experience and provided employment and volunteer opportunities for community artists. But I'll certainly look to the chair of the committee, who was actually engaged in the discussions directly.
And I will turn to Councillor Nicholson, who chairs that committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. The work plan is really about those matters in the city that we would like our arts and culture groups to be aware of and to consider whether they can contribute and be part of anything that's coming up in the city. There often can be an arts and culture component. The only thing I've heard of with respect to the LPGA event so far is I think Councillor Reamer told me that the Rotary Club is doing the parking. Is that?
Actually, the Rotary Club is doing recycling.
Oh, thank you. Recycling. Well, I hope they will do it in the most artistic manner possible.
Oh, you park bicycles.
And that's why events that may seem unlikely, like the summer games, okay? We'd like to have the summer games. We'd like to have an arts and culture component to the summer games. We think our city has a lot to show off, not just in our athletic abilities. There will be people here, there will be things that they want to see after they've watched somebody run down the track. Thank you.
Yeah, no, fair. Fair enough. Appreciate the answers. Councillor Robinson.
So, given that we all had the same questions, it would seem that the item on the work plan should be to investigate community events and celebrations that might involve our community arts and cultural groups, and then list it. And that would be the work plan, rather than just listing them, because they're actually not the work plan. It's just investigating if there's some opportunity there. Thank you.
Thank you.
It does seem that the 8 bullets don't fully encompass the work plan, yes. Good. Okay. Any further discussion?
Does Council accept that as an amendment? Is that, are people comfortable with it?
I was about to do that. I was about to formalize it, but thank you. Okay. Any further discussion on the issues? Okay. The motion, I suspect, is to amend to say that the work plan is, as Councillor... There you go. Councillor Nicholson.
And I would confirm that that better captures the committee's understanding of its work plan.
There you go. Looks like we did well. Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously on the motion as amended. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns totem poles at Poirier, and the advisory committee's recommendation that council direct staff to include the historical background and information relative to the totem pole currently located at Dogwood Pavilion on the city's website and utilize social media outlets to promote the totem pole.
Move.
Second.
Move by Councillor Nicholson, second by Councillor Reid. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I think you'll all recognize that this reflects an item that came up at the town hall meeting. There was considerable interest at the advisory committee and a far more informative discussion. I learned a lot more listening to the committee. One of our committee members has undertaken to go away and research the history of the pole a little more thoroughly than perhaps what we heard, basing it on what I remember of what I heard at the town hall meeting. And also look at the cultural implications of I'm told that some people believe that totem poles are carved for a particular place and that moving them is not appropriate. And we don't know what the story is behind this pole. And so one of our committee members is seeking to come back to us with that information. So hopefully that will mean there will not be a great deal of work for staff to do, other than getting the information and putting it up in a public way. Thank you.
There you go. Good. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 13 is fourth and final reading of sign amendment bylaw 4297. The recommendations that council give fourth and final reading to sign amendment bylaw 4297.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Asmussen.
I'm just going to excuse myself in this one for perceived potential conflict of interest. It's right in my neighborhood.
Thank you. Item 14 is the fourth and final reading of Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4312, and it pertains to 3466 and 3472 Gislason Avenue. Recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4312.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reamer. Yep.
Thank you. A couple of council members received an email from a local neighbor to this address, and she had received no prior notification for this particular cancellation bylaw. And I'm just wondering what our usual procedure is with respect to this.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. In this instance here, directly the answer is there's a notice placed in the paper, and that's how I understand this particular resident became aware of it and then came in and spoke with staff after that.
Yeah, she had actually received mail notification prior to on another next door lane cancellation, if you like. Yeah. And so I gather she was expecting to be notified by mail on this one as well, but that's not the case.
Unfortunately not through the chair. The confusion arose with the property sort of to the north and east of hers had recently gone through a rezoning process, and so with the notification for the public hearing, she would have received a letter specific to that. Okay. And with that public hearing, I recall the staff report had actually highlighted this or mentioned that this was part of the proposal, that the lane was proposed to be closed and exchanged, and so it was public knowledge through that rezoning process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no further discussion. Motion is fourth and final. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 15 is also a highway dedication cancellation. This is fourth and final reading of Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4245, which pertains to 319 North Road. Recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4245.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. You're not allowed to ask.
Item 16 is consideration of fourth and final reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4293. This is authorization for an issuance of a development permit for 730 and 734 Dogwood Street. The recommendations of Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4293, and that Council approve the signing and sealing of the DP, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I remember this public hearing quite well, and there was a lot of residents from the surrounding area who were opposed to this redevelopment, but I just wanted to get on the record that I actually ended up writing about the issue on my blog, and there was it sort of put a nice little capsule, encapsulated some of the issues that we deal with on a continuing basis, the neighborhood concern versus our overall vision for the city, the sort of the intimate things that some people might bring up. I remember one of the neighbors talked about the wind being disrupted or something on the breeze or something, versus the strategy that we have for some densification, for allowing more housing options and stuff. And it was very interesting to be forced to look at that, and it's the sort of thing we look at on quite a regular basis, I guess. And so I wanted to tell the people who took the time to appear at the public hearing that I, for one, did consider all of their issues quite seriously and weighed them against, I think, all the goals and aspirations that we have on council regarding housing choices and infill housing and densification and transit-oriented development. And in the end, I am going to support this rezoning. So It's not that we ignored, not that I ignored what they had to say, but I think there are bigger issues at play here, more important and very important ones. That's it. So I'll be supporting the rezoning.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the rezoning as well, but I wanted to make a couple of comments similar to yours, actually, Councillor O'Neill, because one of the comments at the public hearing, as I recall, was that this project would cast shade on the property next door to the south, which, of course, obviously is an oxymoron in the northern hemisphere, but where it does suggest that there is inadequate information sometimes. And I've mentioned it before, and the possibility of having a better system to link the public documents on our city's webpage with an application number on the sign on the property. When we do public hearing, we could post that number that says, go to the website, put in this 4-digit number, and up will pop the plans, everything that we have that's publicly available for the public hearing, rather than have people really fear the worst until Monday morning when they can get their questions answered, and perhaps not even completely, and perhaps not even with the drawings. Having some electronic way that public can get better information. This particular one, we saw several examples lately where I thought the public came to the public hearing sometimes with information that was just plain inaccurate or inadequate. Inadequate is something we can correct, I think. Inaccurate, we have to work even harder to correct because sometimes there's other reasons for it. But I would love to have us explore some kind of electronic linking with the public documents, because there are days when I'd love to be able to find the document easily or link to it using social media to let people know exactly where those documents are. No further discussion? All in favor of fourth and final? All opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Item 17 is authorization for the issuance of a development permit for proposed exterior modifications for a Target store in Coquitlam Centre Mall at 2929 Barnet Highway. The recommendation is the Council approve the signing and sealing of the DP and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Sikora. For the Target store, all in favor? Opposed? Target.
Just like the Army and Navy's the A and NPT.
Okay, the Target store passes unanimously. Target is coming.
Item 18 is the application for a permanent change to a liquor license for a food primary establishment. This is the Grand Palace Seafood Restaurant on 1163 Pinetree Way, and Council has two options: to direct a public consultation process or opt out of commenting.
B, second.
Question?
Yeah, this time it was Councillor Reamer and Councillor Asmundson almost simultaneously. To move, seconded by Councillor Nicholson, I think. Yes. Okay, Councillor Reid.
Councillor Reid has a question, because when you read the description of this facility on page 2, it sounds an awful lot like a cabaret to me. So what's the difference between a cabaret and a restaurant that allows singing, dancing, patron participation, and bringing acts in, like bands and stuff? And if it's a cabaret, we have a cabaret zone.
Yeah, my understanding, and I don't have those specific details in front of me, but I don't believe that the province continues to have the same type of cabaret license. We have a grandfathered one in the city. So this one is that they're asking for a specific type.
No, I know what they're asking for, but my question is, what's the difference between this and a cabaret?
It may be the current form of that type of license. I don't have more specific details than that. It will be it's judged as a form of patron participation because there is dining and dance involved.
Oh.
And of course the hours.
Well, the hours are limited. They're not asking for a change in their hours, and it's limited to their food primary establishment.
So it's a food primary location up till midnight. It is the former Kieran restaurant. So
yes.
Yeah, no, I know where it is.
The disco lights are.
That's right. And so it's not, its primary mode as a business is as a restaurant, and this is an adjunct to what they're trying to do as opposed to what maybe a cabaret may have.
So then we would never have another cabaret because there's no need to have that designation anymore, or that zone, because people just upgrade what they've got now. that correct?
I think we, as you have seen, as council continues to entertain these applications, word gets out in the community, and more applications with more specific requests are coming forward. Yeah.
So my point is, fellow councillors, is that cabarets, we had one, Boone County. That's our cabaret in Coquitlam. And we decided we wouldn't have any more cabaret places because of all the problems that we got. I don't have a problem with this one. It's within inside parking, all that stuff. But if there's no such thing as a cabaret license anymore, and all folks have to do is upgrade their food primaries, that means that we can have a whole city full of dancing, dining, musical entertainment, i.e. cabarets, but we don't call them that anymore. That changes the face of your community, so I'm quite interested to hear the answer from this, because there we go again, down another rocky road that we didn't count on.
And I would suggest that in terms of being, if it was to be more of a cabaret type experience, they would verge towards a liquor primary as opposed to here, which is a.
But it still opens the door. I always thought we sort of had a cabaret and it was a little special spot. Now it's no longer.
There are nuances, and I think what you tend to see with any form of regulation is people tend to look for where they can.
So there we go. Be careful which apartment you buy. You might be right on top of a cabaret.
You want that?
Okay.
Maybe you do. Not for long.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is this not the Karen's restaurant, the East Karen's restaurant before?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, Mayor, we got nobody living around the area, so I know why we're going through the process of him, you know, I think, you know what, they'll definitely be approved. There's nobody, no neighborhood is going to complain. There's no neighbors around it, all businesses, they will definitely support it, you know, so those are things that I'm concerned about. But, you know, I see nothing wrong with it. It's on the second floor, away from everything. I don't see no problem whatsoever with it.
I don't have a problem with that one.
I have no trouble with it as well. We're a community that wants to explore how to make sure people are more active, and what's more active than having a nice Chinese food dinner and then getting up and dancing a bit.
Or singing.
Or singing. Councillor Nicholson on the question of dancing or singing.
No, not on the question of dancing or singing. But the point I think here, and we've been over it way too many times, is we can do this. We can move A as recommended, or we can move B, in which case most likely the Liquor Control and Licensing Board will impose a greater cost and a greater consultation process and take considerably more time. So although we're directing them to do something that's going to cost them money, we're actually doing it in their interests, and I think discharging our responsibility to the people of Coquitlam, because the results will come to us as well as to the Liquor Board. Thank you.
And we'll get to comment.
I would.
I think Mr. Gilbert had a comment on that.
I would agree with that analysis. We have generally found that our ability to do it, because we get preferred newspaper advertising rates and other things, and council, in lending their support to previous applications, has swayed the Liquor Control and Licensing branch with council support for a specific option, and we have seen that in the past as well.
There you go. Nobody else? It's A. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 19 is the result of having chosen A
another
meetings ago. This is an application for a permanent change to a liquor license with patron participation, entertainment endorsement at the Glen Pavilion across the street.
Moved B by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Okay, there we go.
BN2.
BN2, that's right. BN2. How do we keep organized crime out of these kinds of facilities? Anyway.
We do have some inside staff monitoring the situation and
okay.
monitoring. Taking names.
Any further discussion? All in favor? B and 2. All opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 20 is the Metro Vancouver Board in brief. We have our representatives available to respond to questions and the recommendations to receive it for information.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that is the last formal item on the agenda.
I have one too.
I know you have to push your button. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I have one item here that I saved to bring up tonight because it's to do with suites and borders, and it's to do with a person that's been paying their taxes and they're absolutely frustrated by what's happening in their neighborhood. There's laundry hanging on the fences, and when they complained, there were 3 young men living there with a couple of vans, and now there's 8 adults and 2 kids, and it's a single-family home with no suite. And when the lady mentioned something to them, they said, "Oh, don't worry, we're building a couple of suites." And she keeps saying, "I'm paying my taxes, which go up, up, up. We have bylaws, we have bylaw enforcements. Why do you have them if no one is going to come and enforce them?" So I think this lady's been going through years of frustration. I'm going to pass this over to, I would suggest, Mr. Gilbert. And somebody's got to deal with this. This is just atrocious. And I think it goes on. The calls I mostly get, I guess perhaps because of what I do, is from illegal suites, and not just one illegal suite, but 2 or 3 in a house. And we're doing nothing about it. And I keep passing them on to staff, and I don't know if our hands are tied or what, but we've got to start enforcing some of this stuff. It's just not fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, I have a notice of motion. Notice of motion that the City of Coquitlam write to the Heritage Canada Foundation expressing council support for inclusion of the Riverview Hospital grounds on their list of the 10 most endangered heritage sites in Canada, as proposed by the Riverview Horticultural Centre Society, and this is supported by many in this community, and it's seconded by Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Is there any urgency in that? No, I guess not. Okay, just a second. Okay, I'm going to have to ask for Councillor Reid's microphone, please. Councillor Reid.
I would like to deal with this issue tonight. There is some urgency to it. Members of the Riverview committee have already, they're writing letters at this point in time, and we would really like to get on this list. So I would wonder if we can indulge.
The motion is to waive notice?
Yes, thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Nicholson, and the notice be waived. Any discussion on that question? On the question of, is there any discussion on the question of waiving notice? It is. Councillor O'Neill. One moment, please. Councillor O'Neill on the question of waiving notice.
I've just enabled QB because we had a long list of other speakers.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't know what this actually entails. I don't know about the Heritage Canada Foundation list. I've heard of it. I don't know what this means, so I don't, unless you want me to do research on the spot here, I would have to say I oppose the doing this right away. I would like to have time to look into this. So I oppose the.
So your suggestion would be
just to do the regular process.
This had been emailed earlier or in the day or something like that.
Or even, over the weekend or something, I could have looked at it. I didn't know anything about it.
I see some paperwork coming around to you, which probably won't satisfy you about the ability to read it. Yes, it's not my motion. Okay. There we go. Okay.
Perhaps just for the information of council, notice to waive procedure on this requires a 2/3 vote.
That's right. Councillor Nicholson on a motion to waive procedure.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Heritage Canada Foundation top 10 most endangered places list only came to the attention of the Riverview Horticultural Centre Society. I'll just interrupt myself to tell Councillor O'Neill that the last page has large print. The other two are screenshots.
That comment wasn't directed at.
Okay.
That comment it wasn't directed particularly at you. I don't know.
So it came to the attention of the Riverview Horticultural Centre Society late in the day. The actual deadline for submissions was, I think, 4 days prior to Sue Haberger contacting the Heritage Foundation. They nonetheless said they would like to have the application. They were familiar with Riverview and its significance here in the province and in the country. She put together her submission in short order and got it into them. That's what we've passed around to you. Their deliberations are ongoing now. I think having a letter of support from the city while they're considering their decisions as to who to place, what places to place on that list is important. So I think time is quite critical. And I think most of us here know how significant Riverview is to all of us and to our community. I appreciate Councillor O'Neill's desire to have time to research. The Heritage Canada Foundation does not do things lightly. They will look carefully at the application, and I believe that we should support this move by the Riverview Horticultural Centre Society and by a number of other community groups who have also acted in support of that application. I should make it clear, I'm asking that we support the inclusion of Riverview on the list. I'm not asking you to carefully read all the words written by the Riverview Horticultural Centre Society and support each and every one of their assertions. I think it's plain on its face that Riverview is significant to us and that its place as a place of heritage is endangered to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor O'Neill, with that question answered a little bit, I had something else.
Yes, thank you. So according to this, the top 10 endangered places list is released annually, I don't know at what time, to bring national attention to sites at risk due to neglect, lack of funding, inappropriate development, or weak legislation. You said that Heritage Canada doesn't do these things lightly, but you're asking Council to do this lightly. I think so. I don't think we should. I think we should. Well, first off, I'd like to see, one of the things I'd like to do, look at the past list, see how this fits in, see if this is actually, they're going to get this and say, well, how does Coquitlam think this merits top 10 list when all these things are more important, obviously, from their point? I don't know. I don't know these answers. These are all, I took part in the Heritage open house a couple of weeks ago and talking about the heritage values that the province is asking for, talking about the heritage values, what do you consider important heritage values of Riverview, and I think many of us, all of us know that there's tremendous heritage value there. But I, for one, am uncomfortable with just rushing into this. I think it's doing it lightly, and I want to know more about the Heritage Canada Foundation. I'm upset, well, I'm not upset, but I'm disappointed that I didn't find out about this before. I'm a longtime friend of Sue Haberger as well. I wish she'd let me know about this. So anyway, so I think we should take our time on it. I don't know what the rush is. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is something that came up at the last minute, and the application process was already underway. So they've asked all the groups who are members of the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee to write letters of support. It's interesting to point out that the Riverview Lands, the whole site is on the municipal and provincial heritage registries. The Riverview lands are also on the Canadian Register of Historic Places. And an application for the National Historic Site status was made several years ago. It passed the first stage, but it didn't get approval from the land owner, which of course is the provincial government. So that sort of got left in limbo at that point. The Heritage Canada Foundation was created in 1973, and the Society's mandate is to preserve and demonstrate and encourage the preservation of nationally significant and historic architectural, natural, and scenic heritage of Canada. And I think the Riverview lands certainly qualify. The Heritage Canada Foundation uses three primary criteria to determine sites for inclusion: the significance of the site, urgency of the threat, and community support for preservation. And I certainly feel that the Riverview lands certainly qualify on all three of those fronts. Also, some quick research. We have pulled up a list of the last list from 2011 of the top of the previous year's 10 most endangered place list. It's their 7th list that they've issued. They began doing this in September of 2011, so presumably this year's list will be issued in September. The current list from last year includes an old school in Brighton, Ontario, a great old industrial building in Brantford, the Guild Inn in Toronto, which is being and I like this frame, demolished by neglect. And I think we have a couple of buildings at Riverview that probably qualify in that category as well.
Councillor Hodge, I hate to do this. The motion is the emergency nature of this, not the
I'm thinking,
not the merits of the motion.
But to be included in this.
How urgent is this for tonight? That's all.
I think the importance is that the decision is underway. The other applicants have been included in the list for application, and I think it's important that we support it in a timely fashion, so that we make our feelings on the site known. And I think I was trying to answer some of Councillor Neal's concerns there, and I believe that the concerns that this group addresses are very much in line with our concerns. And that I think because the process is underway, the Heritage Conservation Plan is underway right now, that's going to come forward in September and become part of the future land use planning process for the provincial government, that I think it's included that we get on this year's list.
Okay, very quick clarification. When is the deadline for this year's list?
It's passed. It's passed.
Passed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've accepted an extension, but been told to get the end.
Understood.
For the first time that the deadline is passed?
And they were given an extension.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Significant information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Robbins.
Well, that's what I was going to say. My understanding that I had heard is that the deadline for application has passed, but the organization has extended for this group, extended an opportunity for them to get their application in. So in order for us to get included, they're trying to get everything together, and so it is urgent in that respect. The other thing is that this is another group that's asking for a letter of support from this council, and it's a group that has been around and been a leader around preserving this significant landholding. So I have every confidence that they have done their research, and so if all they're asking from us is they would like this council to provide a letter of support for their request, then I'm comfortable waiving motion for those reasons. Waiving notice.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I can support the motion to expedite this and the motion, but I will say that I'm disappointed that I don't think this is a big issue, and I don't think it was something that needed to be not communicated to the rest of council prior to this meeting. I think the mover and the seconder, the meeting of the Heritage Society would have been a week ago. This issue would have come up. You would have known about the desire to go this direction. It would have been simply easy to send an email to all council. This is what we're doing. We'd like to bring it up. And I think you would have had full support. We had some background information. I think dropping it and not explaining it to the rest of council, either the beginning of today, a couple of days ago, I don't think is a good way of decorum and respect for the rest of the council members around here. I think it could have been a lot better handled. And I don't know why the delay and just leaving it to the very last item as a notice of motion. I think that was poorly done. I'll support it, but I think in the future on these type of things to canvass your council members before you come in on these things, that's the problem with notice of motions, especially when you want to expedite it and move the date past to get this done, that you should be inclusive of all your council. To send an email out takes no time at all to explain the gravity of the situation and what you're doing and give a background. You had time from that meeting when you did this. That's my one disconcern about this whole process that you brought in front of us. I'll move this forward, but I don't think that should happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. You know, that's exactly what's happening with notice of motions. I made a motion to get rid of notice of motions because I thought they're a waste of time, and they are a waste of time. The fact that something as important as this comes forward, and then everybody wants to know 3 or 4 or 5 days ahead of time that it's going to be a notice of motion. Can we get your support? Well, I didn't know about it till this morning either. But the fact is that there's going to be moved up because it's urgent to get through today. So I feel wonderful about it. The fact is that, you know, going back to Colony Farms at the Riverview Hospital, we're going back years ago. I remember when Jim Tunn had problems with Colony Farms and Riverview Hospital, you know, when he was the mayor. And when I became the mayor, I had problems. The fact is, in fact, you know, those days, Mayor...
It's waiving procedure, though. That's the motion is waiving procedure.
Yeah, I know, waiving procedure. So I have no problem waiving procedures to get on with this very, very important thing that we had problems for years, and whether it be 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years, it's worthwhile supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson has spoken. I'll just express similar comments. If you want something presented and you have the information early enough, could you just, if you let council know, then we can do our research. I think that's all that's being asked here is we don't know this particular process. We don't know if there's a different designation. We don't know that sort of thing. I think everyone here wants the buildings, and I'm going to actually ask the clerk to throw something up. Wants the buildings at Riverview recognized for what they are. And this is West Lawn. This is what it's becoming. It is deteriorating now, but this isn't deteriorating on an urgent basis. It's been deteriorating for a number of years. But it would be helpful if we get information about these kinds of motions as early as possible so that all of us can be comfortable and we can do this unanimously. Because I suspect now it's not going to be unanimous, not because Councillor O'Neill is any less supportive of the Riverview Hospital. There's 10-year-old trees growing in the gutters here. Not because Councillor O'Neill or any of us is less supportive of the heritage values of this site, but because we want to make sure that we don't make mistakes when we do notices of motion. We have seen notices of motion that have gone sideways, and there's a couple of them before council right now where it's been going on for quite some time. This one, I think, should have been able to be adopted relatively quickly tonight without any debate, without a lot of debate, if we'd have been given notice, and I gather some councillors were given a bit more notice. But I myself know nothing. I will probably support this because I don't want to be accused, certainly, of not supporting the designation of Riverview as a heritage site. But one of the 10 most endangered, I'm not certain it's one of the 10 most endangered. But at the end of the day, the question tonight is it urgent enough? I'm told that it is urgent, so I'll support the amendment or the waiving of procedure to make it urgent. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Asmundson. I appreciate your comments. I can tell you that the materials got pulled together late this morning, and I actually ran upstairs at 5 to 7 to grab them out of my mailbox, having had them reproduced upstairs on behalf of Councillor Hodge. So I didn't have much opportunity to communicate with anybody. And I wanted to clarify the question about deadlines. The deadline for submissions had passed by 3 or 4 days when Sue Haberger learned of the thing. She put her material together and they accepted it. So the submission is in place and accepted and in for consideration, and what we're being asked to do now is to provide a letter of support for the inclusion of Riverview on that list, which I expect will publish at the beginning of September 2012, so I believe there's not a lot of time for deliberation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk one more time. You know what? I'm going to support this, and I'll support waiving the notice time as well, because I think it is important for Council to speak unanimously on an issue like this that's got such broad public support and has had broad Council support over the years. But that actually speaks to this issue of this notice of motion here. And I can see on a hot political subject where somebody knows that it's going to be divisive, for that person to phone around to just a few of his or her allies to see, do you think we're going to have a majority on this? Would you, and not to let everybody know about it. But on an issue like this, it's motherhood, that's apple pie, why do you not let everybody know? And that's, I think, what Councillor Asmundson was saying. This sort of thing, you really have to. Otherwise, you piss me off. And I got pissed off tonight on this thing. And I'm going to back down and go ahead with this because it's the right thing to do for Coquitlam. No, it's the right thing to do to go ahead with this. I'm not going to make any more point than using and I hope the people out there aren't offended by my crude language, but that's the way I'm feeling.
I suspect one or two of them got pissed off. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm I have not had conversations with these two about this situation whatsoever. I found out about it when Sue Haberger had stumbled across it. Nobody even knew this thing existed. And she says, what do you think? They're going to let us in and I'm already applying. And she says, do you think the city will write a letter of support? I said, I don't know, but if they do, you should take it to the committee and it should go through the committee. That's how I found out about it. But on a comment that the mayor made, and is there any urgency? And we look at this. Well, I'm sorry, but this is just damn disgusting. I could use some bad words too, and I think I'm going to just comment a bit. Because when I see this was an award-winning building 100 years ago. This won our community awards, and it's disgusting the way that the landowner, the province, no matter who was in charge at the time, has let these buildings deteriorate to the stage they are. Every other city in Canada is proud of their heritage and proud of what we've got, and good old Coquitlam and good old BC province, we just let them rot, and that is something that's disgusting. That is the sad tragedy of this whole thing. I'm done.
Thank you. I didn't even cut you off because this is on the question of waiving notice. I didn't want you to be annoyed with me.
Don't cut me off when I'm mad on Riverview.
Or no, I want to go there. Okay. I see no others. This is on the question of waiving notice. All in favor? Opposed? We're unanimous on waiving notice. The notice of motion has been moved and seconded. It's before us now. Any further discussion on it?
Question.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
No, I have not. Sorry.
Adjournment has been moved, seconded.
Not a notice of motion.
Sorry, Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was supposed to bring this up a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, but unfortunately with the late night at 11:15 at night, I didn't think it was appropriate to bring it up. But the curling club, the situation is this, that they're upset. The fact is that, every sports organization went up by 4% in their rates for the year. And they've gone up 10%. And not only that they're upset about going up by 10%, they're upset the fact is it's in the middle of their season. You know, if baseball was to get their rates set beginning of the season, or the curling club at the beginning of the season, it'd be fine. But this one, right in the middle of their season, which they're upset. So I'm going to make a motion that anything over 4% be refunded to the curling club. Thank you.
What?
And, okay, so we have a notice of motion. We'll consider that at the next meeting then.
I don't think we need a notice of motion on this. What? Why would we need a notice of motion on something like this?
Well, it's not on the agenda. The council procedures that have been in place since you were mayor.
No.
Agenda,
I was more reasonable than that. Very, very good mayor.
Okay.
We had a very good mayor, Dan.
Yes, we did. The
you
times have changed.
To follow some kind of notice of motions that go forever and a day.
Councillor Sikora, you voted in favor of the council procedure that has the notice of motion procedure in it. And all of council did at the time. It was a different, the two members of council.
I don't think I did, and then I wanted to bring a notice of motion to get rid of notice of motion, and it was declined. Okay, so very simple. So don't include me in your...
Okay, sorry, but it is in the council procedures. It's not me making this up here. This is a council procedure that says that a member of council could, if this was an emergent item, if it were an emergency on it, we could have a notice to waive the notice period.
Next week, then.
Right.
But now it will be on the council agenda for the next council meeting.
That's right. So we'll talk about it next month.
Or you can do as you can argue that it's an emergency and we should consider it today.
Emergency.
Pardon?
We'll do it next council meeting. It's a notice of motion. It'll be next council meeting.
We'll do it at the next meeting if you wish, but I think that, this is something that I was going to bring up 3 weeks ago, but our executive meetings are so busy to where we, at the last minute, got to go to regular meeting. Last week, we went to 11:15, and I noticed that last meeting, the Parks and Recreation staff had 3 or 4 their staff to reply to this, sitting all afternoon and all evening. I wonder what that really cost us in wages. And I can tell you something, this notice of motion comes in next week or 2 weeks from now. I wonder how many staff will have for Parks and Recreation and how much that's going to cost us. A hell of a lot more than the rebate, Mayor. A hell of a lot more than a rebate, because we're not controlling the staff hours that are put in here.
I know, but Councillor Sikora, you're debating a motion that hasn't been moved.
That's fine. Thank you very much. It's a notice of motion then.
Okay. I want to make clear that this is a procedure, and the reason for the procedure is I wouldn't be able to vote in favor of that because I don't know any of the facts related to the 4% or 10%. I don't know what other committees have. I don't know how we would do it for a sports team whose season is, well, the middle of their season is our fiscal year end. So do we change their rates at a different time than we change the rates for soccer? No, wait, they span the year end as well. So.
You were in a budget debate when these 4%ers came up to everybody. Don't you know what was in the budget that you voted for?
Councillor Sikora, you voted for. You were in the budget debate as well, but you didn't raise this one at all because it wasn't actually presented.
Well, because the 10% came at a later date. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
It's because council adopted a procedure, a process that staff apply, which has the average of the local region being the rate applied for the next year, and that's why it's out of council's hands. So anyway, that'll be debated next week. So at least we'll have a chance to get some more information before we have a vote on that. Are there any other items? Hopefully not. Thank you all. A motion to adjourn was right here from Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor of adjournment? All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Are there any questions in the audience on tonight's agenda? Any questions at all? Any questions at all? No, any questions? No. Thank you very much. Good night.
Can we go home now?